Are you there? And whenever you think about marriage, you just crumble down with fear. And you don't just want to have that conversation. And when you imagine going home over the holidays, those nagging aunties, in quotes, let me call them that politely, will be on your case. Unatuletea lini? Unatuletea nini? This is your video. My name is Precious Cole, and thank you always for watching The Anchored Man. Interestingly, actually, in psychology, the fear of marriage or committing to long-term relationships is actually called gammaphobia. Gammaphobia. Gammaphobia is basically a term that is used to refer to people who fear commitment to long-lasting relationships and or marriages. So we call them gammaphobic. And you know, phobia, like just any phobia, is a type of a disorder. And you know, we live in a generation and time, particularly those of us that are in faith, anytime we hear anything fear, we demonize it and we rebuke it in the name of Jesus. But some of it actually is very psychological. And you know, phobia is just a type of a disorder that's usually a result of some underlying issues that causes people to react a certain way when they come across certain triggers. So it's just the way, for instance, those of us that are hydrophobic or waterphobic, like myself, and when I come across very large masses of water, this is what I feel from some past experiences. So for some of us, we could be gammaphobic. We fear not just getting married, but committing to long-term relationships because of certain things that we've gone through during our upbringing that have led us to a place of fear. So there are those of us, when we imagine committing to long-term relationships, when we imagine getting married, it just doesn't sit well with us. Some of the most common causes of gammaphobia, or this fear of relationships and marriage, I will just break them down into three large categories, most of which we covered in our previous video. Number one, past failed relationships. If you're coming from a space where you've been in relationships before that didn't work, that has an effect on how you grow up to be, your view of relationship and commitment to long-lasting relationships and or marriage. So it's possible that some of us are afraid of committing because the relationships we've been through in the past, they didn't work, they failed. And that changes our view over time progressively. It changes what we imagine or think about, you know, long commitments with people, whether in marriage or just normal friendships and relationships, and so on and so forth. The second reason that would make some of us gammaphobic is when we are coming from families that, I don't want to call them that, but let me just use this term, dysfunctional, or where we experienced divorce or there was violence, whether verbal or physical. If we grew up in such kind of environments, our view of relationships is largely impacted by that. So if you're in a relationship with someone who's gone through that, you'll realize there are things about how they relate with you, and there are certain behavior they put on when you look like you're raising your voice, for example. Why? Because it reminds them of a past experience that was hurtful, and so on and so forth. So if we've been through such kind of setups, if we witnessed our parents go through a very nasty divorce, we can become afraid of committing to marriage. Why? Because our most immediate example of that failed. And so we tend to carry that along, you know, as we go and grow up in life. We keep that closely as a close memory or as a close reference to marriage and family. Always remember, your first picture of what a family or marriage looks like is always the home you grew up in. And many of us, whether knowingly or unknowingly, we don't realize that the kind of relationship we saw with our parents largely impacts our view of relationships today. How we saw them treat one another largely impacts our way of relationship in our day and time. So it's important for us to realize and take note of this thing. Number three, unease about your partner. Now, this is for those of us that, for instance, are in a relationship and we want to get married. There are some of us in those relationships, whenever our partner fronts or begins to have discussion about marriage and this lifelong commitment, we become very uneasy. We become very uncomfortable. Why? Chances are there's something about your partner that probably they've not disclosed enough. There's an area about them that you do not feel like they've given you enough closure. And those kind of things can lead you to a place of fear, where when they begin to have conversations about you committing to them, you become afraid. You retract. Why? Because there are aspects about their lives and how they are and who they are that could still be at play and making you uncomfortable, because either you feel like they've not been open enough and so on and so forth. So if you're dating someone who, whenever you bring an issue or a conversation about marriage and commitment to a long-lasting relationship, you realize all of a sudden they become uncomfortable, they become nervy, you might want to pause and actually have a conversation and find out, are there things about you that are making them uncomfortable? Are there things about you that they feel like you've not been open enough? And as we keep having this conversation, we realize that there are many more things we need to work on, which will be the point in our next video, helping you appreciate and see what are some of those tendencies or behavior mechanisms that you need to look out for that will help you to know whether you're actually suffering from this fear, from this gammaphobic fear of relationships, and then how then can we help ourselves move there, pursue healing, and be at a better space towards committing not just to marriages, but to even lasting friendships with those around us. Thank you always for watching The Anchored Men. Let's meet in the next video as we take this further.